Now, after Batman and Robin, the series was considered dead, but in 2000 the comic book genre saw a big resurgence with X-Men. Spider-Man would follow, and after they both became very successful, another Batman movie was being discussed by Warner Brothers. However, instead of continuing the existing franchise, it would completely be rebooted. Christopher Nolan took the job as director and also had a hand in the writing of it as well. Nolan's intentions was to bring Batman back to the dark and gritty style that Tim Burton had done, but make it even more realistic with the villains. Batman Begins is centered around the origins and beginnings of the Batman character. We get to see his parents killed and his mission around the world to try and understand what a poor life is like. He is later trained by Ra's al Ghul and his assistant Henry Ducard, who is actually the real Ra's al Ghul, to learn how to fight and overcome his fears. However, after disagreeing with them on murdering a guilty man, he burns the place down but saves Henry. He then returns to Gotham and becomes Batman and faces a man named Dr. Crane, who has secretly created a gas that shows people their fears and slowly eats away at their minds. He wears a mask to complete his character and is named the Scarecrow. Henry, who then reveals himself as Ra's al Ghul, then uses the gas to attack Gotham. Batman Begins is dark, gritty, but also very realistic when it comes to creating Batman, and that's what makes it an appropriate Batman movie. The characters aren't outrageous, they're down to earth, and easy to understand. For the most part, I liked the story about Batman's origins. I was very happy to see a loyal rendition of Bruce Wayne's parents being killed. However, I had mixed feelings about Ra's al Ghul training him because that wasn't really in the comics. But I do like their depiction of Ra's al Ghul, his rather calm attitude and also his wisdom, which makes him a great opponent for Batman. And plus, Liam Neeson is just a phenomenal actor and pulls it off well. Also, the story behind Scarecrow is a perfect recreation of what was in the comics. I think the only real change to the story is that the Scarecrow appeared in the comics when it was Batman and Robin, and not just Batman. But I don't really care about that change. The casting choice for Scarecrow worried me a little because I'm not necessarily a fan of Cillian Murphy. It's pretty hit and miss when it comes to his roles. He wound up surprising me because his performance is perfect. Plus, a reboot means a completely different version of the main character, Batman. It means a different costume and a new actor. First, we have the man donning the Batsuit, and the actor chosen for the role was Christian Bale. I was actually really interested to see how Christian Bale performed the role, and when I saw the movie for the first time, I really didn't know whether to love his performance or hate it, because it goes very back and forth. I love the fact that they made Batman a lot more realistic and easy to relate to in a way, but then there's the costume and of course Bale's voice. The costume looks more goofy than intimidating. The only part of the costume that bugs me is the mask. Instead of the ears going straight, they're now set at an angle, the nose is wider, and the shape of the mask is a little too roundish. When I saw the movie in theaters opening night, the costume got a few uncomfortable chuckles from the audience, which is never a good sign. Bale's voice isn't terrible. At least he's trying, unlike George Clooney, but he seems to be trying too hard. While the suit got chuckles, the voice got a lot of laughs, and he's been made fun of for it ever since. So despite the dark tone and serious story, it's tough to take Christian Bale as Batman seriously because of those issues. And while we're on the subject of the Batman character, I have to bring up the Batmobile, which is also known as the Tumbler, which looks more like a modified tank. For some reason, I haven't liked any of the Batmobiles after Tim Burton's version. Tim Burton's version of the Batmobile was just perfect, and it was hard to top it, and you can tell that Nolan really wanted to top it. They went for Frank Miller's version of the Batmobile, which was very much like a tank, but I never liked Frank Miller's version, so naturally I don't like this one. Tim Burton's Batmobile will always be my favorite. Then, of course, we have the supporting cast. Michael Caine takes over the role as Alfred, and I think he does a great job. Then there's Gary Oldman as Jim Gordon, and I also liked him in that part. I think the only casting choice that I didn't like was Katie Holmes as Rachel. She was just coming off of Dawson's Creek at the time when she was cast for this part, and when watching the movie, she just seems so out of place. Her performance isn't terrible, but every time she's on camera, I kept expecting the Dawson's Creek theme to pop in. I'm not even trying to be funny with that because it's so easy to expect, especially since she was on that show for so long. Then there's the action, which goes back and forth. When it comes to the cinematography, Nolan is perfect everywhere except for the fight scenes. It looks like Nolan thought that switching camera angles every 2 seconds would make the fights more intense, but it makes them more confusing because you can't really tell what's going on, so they're a little tough to follow. But overall, Batman Begins, despite a few flaws, is the best reboot we could have hoped for, especially after the disaster that was Batman and Robin. After Batman Begins, 2 sequels were actually already being written, and many already knew that the Joker was next in line. So, we move on to The Dark Knight. The story sees Batman facing a new villain, the Joker, a villain who threatens to kill people if Batman doesn't take off his mask and turn himself in. We then meet Gotham's new district attorney, Harvey Dent, who is now dating Rachel, and Bruce sees him as the person who can really save Gotham. I gotta be honest, I love the concept behind the plot, but I'm not a huge fan of the final results. Not that it's a terrible story, it's just incredibly cluttered. Believe me, as small as my summary is, this movie is a little over 2.5 hours long, and they try to squeeze in as much dialogue and action into that time as possible, and also a lot of character development, but not all of it blends very well. Now we have the new characters. First we have the biggest addition, which is the Joker. The Joker's story is pretty much like it was when the character made his debut in the comics, where we didn't know much about his past or how he became a criminal, he just did. There have been changes made to the character's appearance. First is the makeup on his face. While his face always had a clown face look to it, this Joker is more distorted. The makeup is not cleanly put on and looks rather messy, and his smile is caused by cutting the sides of his mouth, leaving huge scars on both sides. This Joker also doesn't use gag weapons like his comic book counterpart, he uses guns and explosives. I do actually like this version of the Joker because there's a certain mystery to him. It's one of those villains that we really don't know and shouldn't know because I think that makes him an even greater villain. Then there's Harvey Dent / Two-Face, and I like their depiction of Harvey Dent as a very outspoken but also very serious district attorney. However, when he turned into Two-Face, that's when I felt the story got a little too cluttered because he just added to an already full story. Don't get me wrong, I love the look of Two-Face because with the help of CGI, they were able to make the perfect recreation of the character that was in the comics. However, I still stand by what I said before. They should have waited to reveal Harvey Dent as Two-Face in a sequel, and just ended his story in The Dark Knight with his face burning. And I gotta bring up one change they made with the Batman character, and I know it might sound like I'm nitpicking, but I'm really not. I hate the new version of the Batman costume that they made for this movie. Now, I thought it was rather clever that they included a long-time production flaw with all the Batman movies in the story, and that was the fact that the actor couldn't turn his head in that costume. But the final version looked so awful to me. The suit from the neck down was thinner, but the mask was the same, and it just looked so weird. The suit makes Batman look like Rooster Man, and again, I'm not trying to be funny, but that's what he looks like. With the action, Nolan learned his lesson and went for action that was easier to watch. All the action is phenomenal in The Dark Knight. My favorite action scene is definitely when the Joker intervenes with the police taking Dent to jail. That's just a phenomenal scene. So overall, with The Dark Knight, I both love it and hate it. I love the look of the characters and the stories behind them, but it's just too much for one movie. Some story really should have been saved for a sequel because some of it is just really packed in tight and just doesn't work. After The Dark Knight, a sequel was already planned, but had to go through some intense rewriting due to the tragic death of Heath Ledger. Because the Joker was originally written in the sequel, which is why the Joker's story kind of came to an abrupt end when Batman left him hanging on the building in the end of the movie. The story is to include Selina Kyle and Bane. I'm actually looking forward to seeing this movie because despite my mixed feelings towards The Dark Knight, I do like what Christopher Nolan has done with this franchise. He's one of very few directors who seems to know how to make these characters real, but also keep them loyal to the comic books. So overall, I'm really looking forward to seeing the next Batman, and we'll definitely see it opening night.